They even arrested the student who saved the cop from the explosion, but the church photo changed everything. Jaden's knuckles were still bleeding when they cuffed him. Not because he'd thrown a punch, but because he'd used them to drag a dying cop out of the wreckage before the second blast could kill them both. Hands behind your back. What the hell? I saved him. Turn around. Now. It was surreal. Sirens still wailed in the distance. Ash clung to his skin. Smoke burned his lungs. The very people he had risked everything to protect now stared at him like he was a threat. Not a hero. A suspect. A suspect because his skin was the wrong color. It had started as a regular Thursday at Jefferson High in Charleston, South Carolina, or as regular as it could be for a black kid who knew better than to walk home with his hoodie up. Jaden Moore, 17, straight-A student, and captain of the robotics team, had stayed late to help Coach Gonzalez fix the PA system before the school board walkthrough. But he took a shortcut home that day, right through downtown past the old courthouse, where the protest had flared up, past the church, the same one from the headlines a few years ago, and right past the unmarked van where the bomb was ticking down. He only noticed the officer, unconscious and slumped against the alley wall, because the red light from the countdown reflected off the chrome of his badge. He didn't think. He ran. Through heat, debris, screaming glass, he tore through it and dragged the man out seconds before the fireball split the street in two. And now they were treating him like a terrorist. You're saying I planted it? He gasped, the plastic seat in the precinct room slick with his sweat. You had motive. You were at the protest. I was cutting through. I was going home. And yet, somehow, you're the only one who knew there was a bomb. They didn't care. Not about the facts. Not about the blood on his shirt that wasn't his. Not about the second-degree burns on his arm. Not about the fact that the Officer Brendan Keeley was alive because of him. They paraded him in front of reporters the next morning. Hood pulled tight, cuffs too tight. His mother's sobs cracked across the press line like lightning. Charleston PD has taken a suspect into custody in connection with yesterday's bombing, the chief announced. We commend the bravery of our officers in containing the situation quickly. No mention of Jaden's name. No mention of what he had done. It would have stayed that way until the pastor from First Baptist posted the photo. It was from a church security camera. The angle was grainy, high up near the steeple, but clear enough. It showed Jaden, silhouetted in smoke, bent over the officer's limp body, dragging him from the alley just before the blast. Time-stamped. Undeniable. By Sunday, it was everywhere. The boy who saved the cop. Justice for Jaden. Black and brave. But the damage was done. He'd spent 72 hours in juvenile detention. Missed 2 scholarship interviews. Colleges stopped answering. His name was now synonymous with suspect before it ever got attached to hero. Reverend Carter, a former civil rights activist who had marched across the Pettus Bridge, showed up at the next press conference holding that photo like it was gospel. Let me be clear, he said into the microphones. This young man is not just a victim. He is a mirror held up to America's soul. You don't have to wear a hood to be guilty. All you have to do is be born black. The crowd didn't cheer. It didn't need to. The silence was louder than rage. And still there were those voices. He must have known something. Why was he even near it? Suspicious timing. Sure, he saved a cop, but maybe he was cleaning up his own mess. They couldn't let it go. They wouldn't. So Jaden's mother, Tanya Moore, did something no one expected. She invited CNN into their kitchen. Not to plead. Not to cry, but to show. The AP history trophies. The coding certificates. The scars on his arm. And most importantly, the letter he'd written 3 months earlier to apply for a community internship with the Charleston Police Department. That letter read, I believe bridges can be built, even in the darkest places. Sometimes, especially in the darkest places. I don't want to be afraid when I walk down the street. I want to be part of the reason no one else has to be either. When Officer Keeley finally woke up, his first words to the press were, that boy saved my life. And y'all put him in chains. The room froze. The cameras zoomed in. The chief shifted behind the podium. And for the first time in 3 days, Jaden's name was spoken with respect. I don't know who planted that bomb, Keeley continued, but I know who carried me through hell to get out. And it wasn't the men you praise in blue. It was that kid. That black kid. Not everyone applauded. Some walked out. Some politicians tweeted about bias in the media. Some called it a stunt. But none of that could undo what came next. The mayor ordered an investigation into the arrest. 2 detectives were suspended. Jaden was offered full-ride scholarships from 3 Ivy League schools. And First Baptist printed the photo in full color, framed it, and hung it at the back of the sanctuary, right below a cross scorched in an arson attack 4 years prior. Because truth has a way of staying lit, even when the world wants to blow it out. The days that followed were a blur. For Jaden, time didn't move forward so much as it fractured broken images, scattered conversations, a newscaster's voice in the background saying his name for the 100th time. But he wasn't celebrating. He sat on the porch swing at his grandmother's house, his eyes fixed on the cracked concrete of the front walk, his hands still trembling not from fear anymore, but from the unbearable weight of being seen only after being torn apart. "What's wrong, baby?" Nana asked, easing beside him with her cane, tapping the wood planks like a slow metronome. He shook his head. "They only see me now," he said, "but not for who I am, for what happened to me." She rested her hand on his. "They don't get to define you, Jaden. Not the badge, not the headlines, not even the photo." But Jaden wasn't so sure. Everywhere he went now, people stared. Some with awe, some with guilt, some with barely hidden suspicion. Like they were still waiting for the twist ending, for proof that the kid who saved a cop from a bomb must have had a darker reason. He started getting letters. Hundreds. From all over the country. Some were kind. Some were cruel. One just said, "Why didn't you let him die?" He didn't answer that one. He didn't answer most of them. Instead, he went back to school. Or tried to. The first day back, the halls were quiet when he walked in. Too quiet. Not respectful quiet, afraid quiet. Like he was radioactive. A symbol no one had asked for, but now had to confront in every math class and lunch period. Some kids nodded at him. A few even fist-bumped him, awkwardly, like trying to claim proximity to courage. But others? They turned away. Coach Gonzalez, ever the anchor, greeted him like nothing had changed. "You still owe me a new speaker," he said with a grin. Explosion or not. That made Jaden smile, the first real one in days. But not everyone was so kind. 3 days later, someone scratched Thug into his locker with a key. The administration said they'd look into it, that they'd check the cameras, that they took it very seriously. But Jaden had learned. Those were just words. So he stayed quiet. Until the fire drill. It was during 5th period in the science wing. Alarms blared, and everyone filtered outside, same as always. But Jaden froze. Smoke. Sirens. Yelling teachers. And just like that, he was back there again in the alley, the concrete hot under his feet, the pressure wave flattening him to the wall. He couldn't breathe. He dropped to his knees on the sidewalk, eyes shut, fists clenched. "Jaden? Jaden." It was Ms. Patel, his physics teacher, rushing over. "I'm fine," he choked out. I'm fine." But he wasn't. Not really. Not since that day. Not since the cuffs. Not since they'd looked at him and only seen a threat. The school offered him a therapist. A district counselor. A woman named Dr. Voss who had a kind face and too many degrees framed on her wall. She didn't say much during their first session. Just listened. Just let the silence stretch until he couldn't stand it anymore. "I don't want to be anyone's symbol," he finally said. "You already are," she replied gently. "The question is, what will you do with it?" That haunted him. Because what could he do? He was 17. He wasn't a lawyer. He wasn't a politician. He wasn't even old enough to vote. But he was smart. And he had something no one could take away anymore. Attention. So he started writing. Quietly at first. Just in notebooks. Then online. A blog called The Smoke Between Us. He wrote about what it felt like to walk into a classroom and have people whisper your name like a ghost. About what it means when your skin is the first thing people see and the last thing they trust. About the moment between fear and action, the space where he had chosen to save and the world had chosen to suspect. The blog took off. Fast. Too fast. Within 2 weeks, he had 20,000 subscribers. By the end of the month, 80,000. News outlets reached out. Podcasts. High school newspapers. Civil rights orgs. They all wanted interviews, quotes, statements. But Jaden was careful. He didn't want to be a poster child. He wanted to be a mirror. The kind that made people look at themselves longer than they wanted to. Meanwhile, the trial for the bombing suspect, the actual bomber, a 43-year-old white nationalist from North Carolina named Clay Birch, finally began. The FBI had linked him to a fringe militia group. They had his fingerprints, his van, his manifesto. But no apology came for Jaden. Not from the chief. Not from the department. Not from the politicians who had whispered he fit the profile. Still, people rallied. Students walked out of schools across the state, holding signs that read, "He saved a life they tried to ruin his. Being black shouldn't be probable cause. Believe black kids." At one of these rallies, Jaden was asked to speak. He almost didn't go. He sat in the car for 10 minutes, his palms sweating, the paper in his hand crumpled from doubt. But when he stepped onto the stage, he didn't read what he'd written. He just looked at the crowd, a sea of faces, brown and white, and everything in between, and said, "I didn't save a cop that day because I thought anyone would thank me. I didn't do it because I thought it would make me safe. I did it because it was right. And I shouldn't have to tell you this, but doing the right thing almost cost me everything. That's what it means to be black in America." He paused. Let the silence work. They say the system is broken, but it's not. It's working exactly how it was designed to. And that's the problem. That quote made the evening news, and the mayor's office, and the Senate floor. Some praised him, some condemned him, but none could deny him anymore. Not when First Baptist nominated him for a local peace award. Not when the state's largest black newspaper named him Youth Voice of the Year. Not when Officer Keeley, fully recovered now, appeared on national television and said, "If Jaden Moore hadn't saved me, my kids would be burying their father." And you know what the city did? They tried to bury him instead. Jaden watched that clip in his bedroom with the volume low. He didn't cry. He didn't smile. He just sat still, hands folded, the weight of history pressing gently on his shoulders. Because this wasn't just about him. It was about every boy cuffed without cause. Every girl frisked for walking while black. Every mother who answered the phone and thought, "This is the call." Every name written in hashtags and forgotten in courtrooms. But Jaden's name, it wouldn't be forgotten. Not anymore. 2 weeks after the speech that ignited a national conversation, Jaden stood in front of the Charleston Police Oversight Committee. Not as a defendant, not as a suspect, but as a witness, a citizen, a voice they could no longer ignore. The meeting room was packed. Reporters lined the back. Every seat filled. The air thick with anticipation and the scent of old varnish on the wood-paneled walls. A commissioner cleared his throat. "Mr. Moore, do you understand that this is a public inquiry into procedural failures, and you're here voluntarily?" Jaden nodded. "You may proceed." He stood, not with anger, not even with defiance, but with clarity. "I was 17 years old when I was arrested," he said. "I hadn't committed a crime. I had just saved a man's life. But within minutes, I became someone else in their eyes. Someone dangerous. Someone disposable. What?" He let the question hang in the air. "I've been told since I was a kid, don't run, don't shout, don't reach. Keep your hands out of your pockets. Speak respectfully. Be compliant. Be perfect. Be invisible." But none of that protected me. Murmurs rose in the back. Someone whispered, "Preach." Jaden looked directly at the police chief, seated to his left. "I don't want an apology. I want change. I want body cameras that don't malfunction. I want community review boards with real power. I want a system where saving a life means more than the color of the one who saved it." There was silence, then applause. Some hesitant, some heartfelt. Outside, people cheered, not for a victory, but for the sound of truth finally breaking through stone. Still, Jaden knew the real battle would never be in hearing rooms or headlines. It was in the quiet moments. The decisions made when no one was watching. The teachers who chose who to believe. The store clerks who chose who to follow. The juries who chose who to fear. He had become a symbol, but he refused to be just that. He returned to his blog, wrote essays, partnered with students in Atlanta, Ferguson, Detroit, helped other kids start their own stories, their own truths. The smoke between us turned into a national youth collective, a digital movement. Soon, CNN ran a headline. "Teen who saved cop, now leading new civil rights generation." Jaden hated that title. Not because it wasn't flattering, but because he wasn't leading. He was amplifying. There were thousands of Jadens, with quieter voices, with no cameras watching. Their stories mattered too. One of them was a girl named Ava Simmons, 16, from Missouri. Her brother had been wrongfully arrested during a traffic stop. Beaten, humiliated. The charges dropped, but no apology ever came. Jaden invited Ava to write on the site. Her post, "My brother doesn't smile anymore," went viral. Then came Darnell from New Jersey, Leah from New Orleans, Malik from Oakland. It wasn't just a blog anymore. It was a movement built on witnessing, on refusing silence. Meanwhile, the Charleston Police Department began implementing reforms under public pressure. The officers who arrested Jayden were placed on administrative leave, pending review. And Officer Brendan Keeley? He requested to speak at Jayden's school. Standing behind the same podium where Jayden had accepted his academic honors a year earlier, Keeley looked out at the students and said, "I thought I understood what courage was. It's wearing the badge, facing danger, protecting people. But the day I nearly died, it wasn't a cop who pulled me from the fire. It was a kid, a black kid, and he didn't hesitate." He paused. "I can't undo what happened after. But I can say this: if you think someone's skin tells you who they are, you don't belong in uniform." The room erupted. Afterward, Keeley and Jayden shook hands, not for the cameras, not for history, but because sometimes two people who've been through the same flames can look each other in the eye and understand what few others can. Still, not everyone believed the narrative. A popular right-wing news site ran an expose. Hero or hustler? Questions surround teen activists' rise. They claimed the bombing was staged, that Jayden had connections to protest groups, that the photo from the church had been doctored. Jayden didn't respond. He didn't need to, because something had changed. For the first time in his life, others defended him before he even had to speak. Students flooded the outlet's page with comments. Teachers published op-eds. Even veterans wrote letters. If this country doesn't stand behind a young man like Jayden Moore, then what are we even fighting for? And then came the invitation. Harvard, Yale, Georgetown. They all wanted him. But Jayden surprised everyone. He turned them down. Instead, he accepted a full scholarship to Morehouse College, the same school where Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had walked the halls. When asked why, Jayden simply said, "I don't want to be a symbol for places that only want me after the headlines. I want to be in a space where I never have to earn my humanity." His freshman year, he majored in political science and minored in sociology. But most of his learning didn't happen in lecture halls. It happened on the streets. He volunteered with legal aid groups, helped expunge juvenile records, testified in state Senate hearings about youth detainment reform. At one rally in Atlanta, he quoted James Baldwin, "To be a Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a rage almost all the time." And then he added, "But rage isn't enough. You've got to build. Rage won't save the next Jayden, but laws might. So let's write them together." His second year, he co-founded the 1020 Project, named after the date he was arrested. Its mission: to pass youth protection legislation in all 50 states. They succeeded in 4 states that first year, then 12, then 21. But through it all, Jayden never forgot where it started. Every year on October 20th, he returned to First Baptist Church in Charleston. He stood under the photo, the one that saved him, and lit a candle for the people whose photos never went viral, whose stories never got told. Trayvon, Sandra, Tamir, Brianna, George, Elijah. And he spoke only one sentence: "I am," because they were silenced. It became a tradition. Hundreds joined, then thousands. By the time Jayden was 25, October 20th had become a national day of youth civic action. Teachers planned lessons. Cities held forums. Students registered to vote en masse. And still, Jayden remained humble, grounded. He often returned to Charleston High to guest teach. One day, a student asked him, "Do you ever regret it? Saving him?" The room went still. Jayden smiled softly. "No," he said, "because I didn't save a cop. I saved a man. If I hadn't, I would have lost something far more dangerous than my future. I would have lost myself." The class was quiet for a long time after that. And somewhere, deep in the pews of First Baptist, the old photo still hung. Smoke in the background. Light cutting through the chaos. A boy dragging a man toward hope. Proof that sometimes one act of humanity can unravel generations of hate. Jayden was 33 when the Charleston Police Department issued its formal apology. He didn't ask for it. He didn't expect it. But when the new chief, a black woman named Rhonda Ellis, stood on the courthouse steps and read the statement with her voice clear and firm, it landed like a long overdue exhale. We failed Jayden Moore. We failed the values we swore to uphold. And in doing so, we revealed the deep fractures still embedded in the foundations of our justice system. Jayden stood beside her, not as a guest, as a partner. Because for the past 5 years, he had worked with her department quietly, persistently to reform internal policy. A decade earlier, they had arrested him in smoke and panic. Now they consulted him on community engagement, on restorative practices, on youth trust building. It was poetic. But Jaden didn't care about poetry. He cared about numbers. He cared about results. And they had results. In the years following the launch of the 1020 project, police complaints in Charleston dropped by 43%. Youth arrests plummeted. School resource officers were retrained. Community mediators were installed in local precincts. More importantly, black kids walked through the city with their heads higher. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was progress. One day, Jaden sat in his office at the nonprofit's headquarters, a modest building in Atlanta painted in bright colors with murals of civil rights icons, when he got a call. "Mr. Moore? This is Principal Hahn from Kennedy Middle School. I don't know if you remember us, but we have a student who's, well, she's reminding a lot of us of you." Her name was Nyla, 12 years old, bright, brave, already calling out unfair dress code policies and organizing student petitions. Her brother had been suspended for disruptive behavior after asking why only white students got chosen for the science showcase. Nyla had written a letter to the school board. It ended with, "My brother doesn't need a punishment. He needs a platform." Jaden smiled when he read it. That sentence, it was his voice in another generation's hands. He flew out to Kennedy Middle that same week. Sat across from Nyla in the library. She asked, "Is it always going to be like this? Us having to fix the things we didn't break?" He thought about that. Then he answered, "Yes, but you won't be alone." He gave her one of his bracelets, the thin black ones with white letters that read 1020, and promised to amplify her story. That story reached 1.2 million views online in 2 days. And that year, Nyla was invited to speak at the National Youth Justice Forum at age 13. Jaden watched her take the stage, a red ribbon in her hair, fists steady at her sides, and knew the baton was already passing. He didn't need to be everywhere. He just needed to make sure someone else could be. By 35, Jaden had published a book, The Smoke Between Us: What One Fire Taught Me About Justice, Identity, and Hope. It became a bestseller, not because it was polished, but because it was honest. In it, he wrote, "I don't know how to fix America, but I know how to tell the truth about it. And I believe that if enough of us do that loud enough, long enough, the truth might start to fix us." He went on a speaking tour, not in big cities, but in small towns, Rust Belt counties, places where the idea of systemic racism still got eye rolls in school board meetings. He never yelled. He never insulted. He just told the story. His story. Ava's story. Nyla's story. And sometimes, stories open more doors than arguments ever could. At one stop in Iowa, a retired police sergeant walked up to him and said, "I used to think this stuff was exaggerated. Then I heard about you. And I just want to say I'm sorry." Jaden didn't shake his hand right away. He looked him in the eye first. And when he saw sincerity, real sincerity, he nodded and said, "Then let's do something about it." Because apologies were a start. But accountability was a journey. By the time Jaden turned 40, October 20th had become a federally recognized day of civic action. Schools held assemblies. Libraries displayed banned Black authors. Families volunteered at community centers. And in Charleston, beneath the photo at First Baptist, they lit 1,000 candles. Every year, Jaden lit the first one. In silence. In memory. And every year, a new youth speaker took the podium after him. He was no longer the face of the movement. And that was exactly how he wanted it. Because this was never about him. It was about what his story unlocked. Justice that arrived too late, but refused to leave again. Empathy born not from tragedy, but from truth. A country forced to look at its reflection and finally, slowly, choosing to change. In his last blog post before handing the site over to younger writers, Jaden wrote, "When I was 17, I saved a man's life and almost lost mine in the process. But if you'd told me then that a single photo, grainy, half covered in smoke, would spark something bigger than I could see, I would have laughed. Or cried. Or both. But here's the thing about smoke. It only rises where there's fire. And maybe, just maybe, we needed the fire to find each other." He signed it. JM, just a boy who didn't look away. At age 47, Jaden received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. He stood at the White House, older now, lines around his eyes, but his voice stronger than ever. The president, a Latino woman from Arizona, handed him the medal and whispered, "You gave my son someone to believe in." He nodded, eyes glistening, and said, "I believed in them first." That night, back in Charleston, the community gathered at the church. But this time, something new had been added. A bronze statue not of Jaden alone, but of the moment from the photo, a boy dragging a man from an alley, both covered in ash, both barely standing, but moving forward. Below it, a plaque read, "He saved a life." They tried to bury him, but the truth rose, and it took us all with it. People cried, people prayed, people remembered, and somewhere in the back pew, a teenager named Elijah Black, 17, quiet sat with a notebook in his lap. He stared at the statue for a long time. Then he began to write his story, the next one, because the fire never ended. But neither did the light. The end. Thank you for listening. If you find it interesting, please like and subscribe to follow the next stories.